The night was made of gold and glitter. The chandeliers sparkled like captured stars, and soft music filled the grand ballroom. Everyone who mattered in the city was there. Billionaires, fashion icons, business tycoons, and socialites dressed in gowns and tuxedos worth more than most people's homes. It wasn't just another party. It was the charity gala, the event that defined the year. People came not only to donate but to be seen, to make deals, and to build connections that could change their lives. Luxury cars lined the red carpet outside. Photographers called out names as guests posed, flashing their brightest smiles. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses floated through the air. Everything looked perfect, elegant, peaceful, and expensive. But beneath the beauty, tension quietly hid in the shadows. Among the guests stood Vivienne Alcott, the heiress of a global luxury brand known for its jewelry and fashion empire. She was beautiful, confident, and carried herself like she owned the world. Every camera turned toward her as she entered the ballroom in a diamond-studded gown that shimmered under the lights. People whispered her name, some admired her, others feared her. Vivienne had a reputation, charming in public, cold in private. She was used to attention, used to getting what she wanted, and never liked to share the spotlight. Across the room was Dr. Maya Brooks, a successful businesswoman known for her calm strength and intelligence. Unlike Vivienne, Maya's charm came from kindness and grace. She was the founder of an eco-conscious fashion company that focused on fair labor and sustainability. Many saw her as the future of modern luxury, beautiful, powerful, but grounded in purpose. Tonight was a special night for both women. Their companies had recently formed a powerful alliance, a $4 billion partnership that promised to combine Vivienne's empire with Maya's innovation. Together, they were supposed to change the fashion world forever. Reporters called them the perfect pair. On the surface, they looked like friends, shaking hands, smiling for photos, and raising glasses to their shared success. But if you looked closely, you could feel something uneasy in the air. Vivienne's smile seemed forced when Maya spoke to the media. Her eyes flickered with annoyance every time someone praised Maya for her intelligence and authenticity. Vivienne was used to being the center of every headline, but tonight the cameras turned more toward Maya. People wanted to know her story, her journey, her values. And that didn't sit well with the heiress who had built her life around fame and control. As the night went on, the gala reached its peak. Waiters moved through the crowd carrying trays of champagne and caviar. The orchestra played a soft, romantic melody. Conversations sparkled with fake compliments and hidden rivalries. It was a world where appearances meant everything. Smiles could hide jealousy and kindness could be used as a weapon. Vivienne stood near the grand stage surrounded by admirers. Her laughter echoed through the hall, but her eyes kept glancing toward Maya, who was speaking with investors and designers. People leaned in to listen when Maya spoke, not because she was rich, but because she made sense. She talked about fairness, sustainability, and empowering workers in developing countries. Her words touched people in a way money couldn't. Vivienne took another sip of champagne, pretending not to care, but deep down something burned inside her. She didn't like being compared. She didn't like sharing the light. To her, this was her world, her event, and Maya was stealing attention that didn't belong to her. Meanwhile, Maya was completely unaware of Vivienne's growing bitterness. She was simply enjoying the night, proud of how far she had come. She had faced countless challenges to earn her place in that ballroom. Prejudice, rejection, and sleepless nights building her company from nothing. For her, this event was more than glamour. It was proof that hard work and dignity could take you anywhere. As the speeches began, the two women were called on stage together. Cameras flashed as they stood side by side. Vivienne smiled widely for the crowd, placing a gentle hand on Maya's shoulder. To everyone watching, it looked like a perfect moment of friendship and unity. Two powerful women celebrating success. But if you looked closely, you could see Vivienne's fingers tighten ever so slightly, her smile a little too stiff, her eyes sharp with something unspoken. The applause filled the hall. Maya thanked everyone with warmth and humility, speaking about teamwork, respect, and the future of ethical fashion. The audience clapped louder. Even some of Vivienne's closest allies nodded in admiration. That moment, the sight of Maya shining brighter than her, planted the seed of what was to come. When the speech ended, the two women walked off stage together, cameras following them. The night carried on, laughter, dancing, and endless gossip. But the air between them had changed. Vivian's smile faded the moment she was out of the spotlight. Her eyes followed Maya with a cold, calculating expression. Something inside her had snapped. Outside, the city glittered under the stars, but inside the ballroom, the story was already beginning to twist. No one could have imagined that this beautiful night, filled with light, luxury, and elegance, would soon turn into a scene of humiliation, anger, and revenge. The gala would be remembered, but not for its beauty. It would be remembered for the moment when one woman's pride collided with another woman's dignity, and the world would watch as everything unraveled before their eyes. The morning after the gala, the world of luxury fashion buzzed with excitement. Newspapers, magazines, and online blogs were filled with glowing headlines. Two queens unite for $1 billion vision. The partnership between Vivian Alcott and Dr. Maya Brooks had officially become the talk of every boardroom and beauty lounge. People couldn't stop talking about them, two women from completely different worlds joining hands to reshape an industry that had long been ruled by ego and excess. One represented old money, tradition, and luxury passed down through generations. The other represented new power, earned, not inherited, respected, not flaunted. Vivian had grown up surrounded by diamonds and limousines. Her family's name was printed on perfume bottles, fashion magazines, and the walls of high-end boutiques from Paris to New York. She was born into privilege, taught from childhood that power was her birthright. To her, life was about image, class, and control. Maya's story was the opposite. She came from a small town, raised by a mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. Her strength came from struggle, her confidence built on survival. She studied fashion design on scholarships, often stitching clothes late into the night to afford tuition. Her dream was simple: to build something honest, something good. The two women met at an international business summit. It was supposed to be just another networking event. Glass towers, polite smiles, and endless business cards. But when Maya spoke on stage about fashion with a soul, her words hit differently. She talked about how the luxury world needed a heart, about fairness, equality, and sustainability. Her voice trembled not from fear but from passion. She didn't speak like a businesswoman chasing profit. She spoke like someone chasing purpose. Vivian was sitting in the front row, watching. She didn't usually pay attention to anyone else's speeches, but this one she couldn't ignore. For a moment she saw something in Maya that she admired: boldness. But mixed with that admiration was something else too: curiosity, maybe even envy. Maya had what Vivian's world lacked: authenticity. Later that evening, Vivian's assistant arranged a private meeting between them. They met at a rooftop lounge overlooking the glowing skyline. The city hummed below as the two women sat across from each other, one sipping champagne, the other drinking herbal tea. Vivian was charming, graceful, and precise. Her words were smooth, rehearsed, and wrapped in politeness. Maya, on the other hand, spoke simply but with depth. She didn't use fancy words or business tricks. She spoke about what she believed: that fashion could be beautiful without being cruel, profitable without being heartless. By the end of the meeting, something unexpected happened. Vivian extended her hand and said, "Maybe we can create something the world has never seen before." And just like that, the deal of the decade began. Within weeks, lawyers, designers, and investors worked around the clock to shape their vision. A $4 billion partnership combining Vivian's luxury empire with Maya's sustainable innovation. The plan was bold. They would launch a new global brand together, one that promised to merge elegance with ethics. At first, it was magic. Maya brought in creative ideas that breathed new life into Vivian's old-fashioned company. She introduced eco-friendly fabrics, fair labor sourcing, and campaigns that featured real women instead of perfect models. The public adored it. Sales skyrocketed and the brand's image was reborn. For a while, it seemed like they were unstoppable. Two powerful women rewriting the rules. Magazine covers called them the future of fashion. Interviewers praised their partnership as a symbol of progress. Two women from opposite worlds proving that unity could break barriers. But behind closed doors, small cracks began to appear. Vivian started to feel overshadowed. Every interview request seemed to ask for Maya. Every award nomination had Maya's name on it. People saw her as the soul of the company, and Vivian didn't like that. She started noticing how the boardroom eyes shifted toward Maya when big decisions were discussed. Investors quoted Maya's ideas. Even her father, the retired founder of the Alcott Empire, praised Maya's modern vision. Vivian's confidence began to turn into resentment. She told herself she was still the boss, the one with the money, the name, the influence. Yet somehow it didn't feel that way anymore. Maya, unaware of the growing jealousy, continued working with passion and kindness. She believed their bond was strong. She saw Vivian not as competition but as a sister in power, two women leading change. She never noticed the cold looks, the clipped tones, or the moments of silence after she left the room. Then came the night of the gala, their biggest public appearance together. It was supposed to be the crown jewel of their partnership, a celebration of everything they had built. But under the glittering lights and perfect smiles, Vivian's pride was cracking, and while no one knew it yet, the partnership that started with a handshake under the stars was about to end with a shocking moment that would echo around the world. The partnership between Vivian Alcott and Dr. Maya Brooks had started like a dream, a fairy tale of power, beauty, and ambition. But as the months passed, something beneath that glittering surface began to shift. What looked like friendship to the world was slowly turning into a quiet rivalry. At first, no one noticed it. Every interview, every photo, every public appearance showed two strong women smiling side by side, holding hands, and talking about empowerment. But when the cameras turned off, the smiles faded just a little faster each time. Vivian had always been the star in every room she entered. People used to wait for her approval, her words, her charm. But now she noticed that when she and Maya walked into the same room, people's eyes didn't go to her anymore. They went to Maya. Maya didn't wear the most expensive gowns or diamonds. She didn't try to outshine anyone. Yet somehow she had something Vivian couldn't buy: authentic respect. When Maya spoke, people listened. She didn't talk in business slogans or fake kindness. She spoke from the heart about real people and real change. Her voice carried honesty, and that honesty made her powerful. Vivian tried to ignore it. She told herself it didn't matter, that she was still the name behind the empire. But slowly, jealousy started creeping into her thoughts. She began noticing the smallest things: how journalists asked Maya deeper questions, how investors quoted Maya's words, how social media called her the face of the future. Vivian felt invisible in a world she had once ruled. In meetings, she became sharper, colder. When Maya suggested an idea, Vivian would politely smile but then subtly change the topic. When Maya got praised, Vivian's laughter turned stiff. Even her compliments began to sound like tiny insults wrapped in sugar. Maya, in her gentle way, tried to bridge the growing distance. She invited Vivian for dinner, sent her small gifts, and thanked her publicly for her support. She didn't see the danger growing inside the woman who once seemed like her greatest ally. To Maya, Vivian was a mentor, a woman of influence who had opened doors for her. But to Vivian, Maya had become a mirror, reflecting everything she wished she still was. The pressure built silently, like a storm behind glass. Vivian started feeling surrounded by people who preferred Maya's ideas over hers. Even her closest advisors started quoting Maya's model and Maya's innovation. Every word felt like a needle to her pride. At events, reporters started calling them the visionary and the heiress. It sounded elegant, but to Vivian it stung deeply. The word heiress felt empty, like someone who hadn't earned her success. Maya was being painted as the visionary, the soul, the future, while Vivian was being reduced to her last name and her money. One afternoon, at a business panel, a journalist asked Vivian a question that made her blood run cold. "Vivian, do you think Dr. Brooks represents the kind of leadership your brand has always needed?" The audience clapped before she could even answer. Maya looked embarrassed, but Vivian saw only betrayal. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept hearing those words: the leadership your brand needed. From that moment, her admiration turned into quiet resentment. She began to feel like her own company was slipping away, her image replaced by someone who hadn't lived her battles or carried her family's name. Meanwhile, Maya kept working tirelessly. She didn't see the hidden looks or feel the growing tension. She just wanted to create something meaningful, something that would make both of them proud. But sometimes the brighter one star shines, the more the other begins to fade in comparison. As the weeks passed, the distance between them grew into silence. They no longer laughed together before meetings. They no longer looked at each other when they gave speeches. Their once warm partnership had become cold and professional. Smiles for the public, silence in private. When the charity gala was announced, it was meant to celebrate the success of their collaboration, the biggest milestone yet. The world saw it as a celebration of female power, luxury, and unity. But for Vivian, it was something else entirely. A test. A chance to prove she still ruled the room. A chance to remind everyone who the real queen was. That night, the ballroom sparkled again, the same chandeliers, the same laughter, the same cameras. But beneath all that beauty, something dark was waiting to break loose. No one could have guessed that behind the glittering gowns and fake smiles, one moment of pride and humiliation was about to destroy everything they had built. The friendship, the partnership, and a $4 billion dream. And when it happened, it wouldn't just end their deal. It would change both of their lives forever. The night of the charity gala glittered brighter than ever before. The ballroom looked like a dream. Golden chandeliers, crystal glasses, and the soft hum of violins floating through the air. Every detail shimmered with wealth and perfection. But beneath that beauty, something heavy hung in the air, something no one could see, but everyone could feel. Vivian Alcott arrived first, draped in silver silk and diamonds that caught the light with every move she made. Cameras followed her like bees to honey. She smiled for the flashes, waved gracefully, and glided through the room as if she owned it. And in many ways, she did. Minutes later, Maya Brooks entered. She wore a long emerald gown, simple but stunning, her natural beauty glowing effortlessly. When she stepped into the ballroom, conversations paused. Heads turned. It wasn't just her appearance, it was her presence. She had a calm confidence that drew people in without trying. Vivian saw it, and for a split second her smile faded. The sound of applause for Maya cut through her like a blade wrapped in silk. She forced her lips back into a smile, but her eyes told a different story. A flicker of envy, a hint of something darker. As the night went on, the two women played their roles perfectly. They laughed for the cameras, toasted their success, and gave speeches about unity and innovation. But behind those elegant smiles, tension brewed like a storm trapped inside a glass of champagne. When dinner was served, the ballroom filled with chatter and laughter. The waiters rolled in the grand dessert, a tall three-tier cake decorated with gold frosting and white roses. It was beautiful, almost too perfect to touch. The crowd clapped as it was brought to the stage for a photo moment. Vivian and Maya were invited up together to make the ceremonial cake cut, a symbolic gesture of their partnership. The photographers surrounded them, flashes lighting up the stage like lightning. Maya smiled warmly, turning toward Vivian. "Shall we?" she said softly. Vivian smiled back, but there was something unsettling behind her eyes, something sharp, almost dangerous. The cameras clicked. Maya reached for the knife, ready to slice the first piece. But in that split second, something unthinkable happened. Vivian scooped up a handful of the cake, rich white frosting and gold decorations, and smashed it into Maya's face. Gasps filled the air. The music stopped. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The sound of frosting hitting silk echoed louder than any scream. The crowd froze. Photographers lowered their cameras, unsure if it was a joke, but Vivian's laughter broke the silence. High, forced, cruel. She laughed like it was all a harmless prank, a moment of fun. But Maya didn't laugh. She stood there, stunned. Icing dripping down her face, her makeup smudged, her gown ruined. Her hands trembled slightly, not from anger, but from disbelief. She had been humiliated, not by accident, but on purpose. The whispers began immediately. Did she really just... Oh my God. Is this a joke? Vivian tried to keep laughing, waving it off. "Oh, come on, darling, it's just a bit of fun," she said, her voice carrying across the stunned ballroom. But no one joined in. The silence around her grew heavier with every passing second. Maya took a slow breath. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She didn't even speak. She reached up, gently wiped the cake from her cheek, and set the silver knife back on the table. Her eyes met Vivian's, calm, cold, unbroken. Then, without saying a word, she turned and began to walk away. Her steps were steady, her head held high. The crowd parted in silence, making way for her like the sea splitting before a queen. Cameras clicked again, but this time it wasn't for glamour. It was for history. Vivian's laughter faded. The sound died in her throat as she realized what she had done, not just to Maya, but to herself. She looked around the room, hoping for support, but found only staring eyes and disappointed faces. No one was smiling anymore, someone whispered. That was disgusting. Another voice muttered, "She's ruined everything." Maya reached the exit and paused for a brief second. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything words could not. Power doesn't need to scream to be heard. Outside, flashes followed her as she got into her car. But this time, the attention wasn't for the heiress. It was for the woman who had been wronged, yet refused to lower her dignity. Inside the ballroom, Vivian stood alone under the golden lights, surrounded by the cold echo of her own arrogance. She had wanted to make herself the center of attention. She succeeded, but not the way she imagined. Because that single moment, that cruel act done out of pride, would soon explode across the world. And within hours it would cost her far more than just a friend. It would cost her a $4 billion empire, and the respect of millions who once admired her. The moment Maya Brooks stepped out of the ballroom, the air seemed to change. Inside, the sound of laughter had died. What had been a glittering celebration only minutes ago now felt like a graveyard of whispers. The guests still sat frozen in shock, some staring at their glasses, others pretending to check their phones, unsure what to do. Vivian Alcott stood alone near the stage, her hand still smeared with frosting. For the first time that night, her face wasn't smiling. The confidence, the charm, the power, and all of it slipped away. She had tried to make a joke out of cruelty, but there was no laughter left in the room to catch it. Maya walked slowly down the grand hallway of the hotel, her emerald gown now stained with cake and cream, the scent of sugar and shame lingering around her. Cameras followed from a distance, reporters whispering her name, but she didn't stop. Her steps were calm, steady, each one echoing softly against the marble floor. People might have expected her to cry or scream or turn around to confront Vivian, but Maya didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any anger. It was the kind of silence that carried weight, the kind that made people rethink what they had just witnessed. Outside, the cold night air hit her face. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, letting the cool wind wash away the sting of humiliation. A black car pulled up. Her driver, seeing her face, froze. "Dr. Brooks, are you all right?" he asked softly. Maya didn't answer right away. She simply said, "Take me home." Her voice was calm, but something inside it trembled, not with weakness, but with something stronger. Control. As the car drove off, the hotel lights blurred behind her. She watched them fade, thinking about what had just happened. It wasn't just about cake. It was about respect, about dignity, about the one thing money could never buy: self-worth. She replayed the scene in her mind, but not with regret. There was no anger left. Instead, there was clarity. That one act had revealed everything she needed to know about Vivian, about who she really was when the cameras stopped flashing. Inside the ballroom, Vivian was unraveling. People avoided her gaze. A few guests whispered in corners. Others quietly left. Even her closest friends didn't know what to say. Her assistant tried to comfort her, whispering, "Maybe it was just bad timing, Vivian. Maybe she'll understand." Vivian didn't answer. She just stared at the half-destroyed cake, the mess she had made, and for the first time in her life, she didn't know how to fix something with money or influence. Within minutes, the videos began to spread. Someone had caught everything: the laughter, the silence, the walk away. By the time Maya reached home, the internet was already awake. Hashtags started trending: Gala humiliation, respect over riches, Maya Brooks. But Maya didn't check her phone. She took off her ruined dress, washed the frosting from her face, and stood quietly before her mirror. There was still a faint red mark where Vivian's hand had pushed the cake against her skin. She touched it gently, then smiled, not out of pride, but peace. She whispered to herself, "Let her have the spotlight. I'll take the truth." Across the city, Vivian's mansion lights burned late into the night. She sat by her bar scrolling through her phone as headlines flooded in. Heiress humiliates partner at Gala. Vivian Alcott faces backlash over racist incident. Dr. Maya Brooks walks away with grace. Each headline hit harder than the last. Her publicist called nonstop. Her father left a cold message. "We built an empire on reputation, Vivian. Don't destroy it in one night," but it was already too late. The world had seen the video. The image of Maya, calm and silent, walking away in that emerald gown was everywhere. On news channels, on social media, on magazine covers. People weren't just angry. They were inspired. To them, Maya's silence wasn't weakness. It was strength. In a world full of shouting, she had chosen dignity, and that choice made her powerful. By morning, Vivian's company stock began to dip. Reporters camped outside her office. Former partners released statements condemning her behavior. Everything she had tried to protect, her image, her power, her control, was slipping through her fingers like sand. Meanwhile, Maya's phone was flooded with messages, reporters, brands, activists, and everyday people thanking her for her composure, but she didn't answer any of them. She wasn't thinking about fame. She was thinking about what came next, because walking away wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something much bigger, a decision that would shake the business world and send a message no one could ignore. That night, as the city slept, Maya drafted a single sentence for her lawyer to send the next morning. Just 9 words that would change everything. Effective immediately. "I am ending the 4B partnership." And with that, silence turned into power. And grace became her greatest revenge. By morning, the world had changed. The sun rose over a city already buzzing with one name on every screen: Maya Brooks. What had started as a glamorous charity gala had turned into a global scandal overnight. The headlines were everywhere, flashing like sirens. Heiress humiliates business partner in shocking gala incident. Cake, cruelty, and consequences. The $4 billion scandal. Dr. Maya Brooks walks away with dignity. Clips of the moment played again and again. Vivian's laughter. The cake hitting Maya's face, and that unforgettable scene of Maya walking away without a word. It was replayed on every news channel, dissected by talk shows, and debated on social media. But the world didn't see it as a joke. It saw it for what it was: humiliation and arrogance. By noon, millions had taken sides. Influencers spoke out. Activists called it a public act of disrespect. Celebrities reposted Maya's picture, calling her the embodiment of grace under fire. Hashtags like "Can't Stand with Maya" and "Respect over Riches" trended in dozens of countries. Vivian woke up to chaos. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from her PR team, her lawyers, even her father. Her assistant looked terrified as she read the flood of angry comments under Vivian's latest photo. "You're a disgrace. Money can't buy class. We're boycotting your brand." She threw her phone onto the bed, hands shaking. It was just a joke, she muttered, trying to convince herself. But deep down she knew it wasn't. At her company headquarters, panic had already spread. Reporters swarmed outside the glass building. The communications team worked nonstop, drafting apologies that sounded polished but empty. Her board members held emergency calls. Investors were furious, not just because of the scandal, but because Maya's sudden withdrawal had killed the $4 billion partnership overnight. The deal had been the company's biggest hope for a new era, the bridge between traditional luxury and modern ethics. Without Maya, that dream collapsed. Stocks fell. Clients pulled out. Partnerships went silent. Meanwhile, Maya stayed quiet. She didn't post, didn't comment, didn't give interviews. Her silence became her strength again. People respected it. She wasn't chasing attention. Attention was chasing her. In her small office downtown, Maya sat with her legal team, finalizing the termination of the deal. Her assistant looked up and said softly, "The media keeps calling you a hero." Maya smiled faintly. "I'm not a hero," she said. "I just know my worth." And that line, those 5 simple words, spread like wildfire once it leaked online. "I just know my worth." It was quoted, printed, and turned into a viral message of empowerment. Back at Vivian's estate, things grew worse. Her apology video, released that evening, only made things colder. Dressed in designer black and surrounded by luxury, She spoke in a soft voice, saying she was deeply sorry if anyone felt hurt. The internet exploded again, but not with forgiveness. People called it fake, rehearsed, emotionless. Comments flooded in. If anyone felt hurt, you humiliated her. Not an apology, just damage control. You lost Forby in our respect. The same media that once called Vivian a queen of grace now called her the symbol of spoiled privilege. Magazines pulled her from covers. Designers canceled contracts. The world that had once adored her was now turning its back. Her closest friends went silent, not wanting to be dragged into the storm. Her father's company lawyers warned that the scandal could cost them their largest clients. Behind closed doors, Vivian screamed, cried, and tried to fix what couldn't be fixed. For Maya, though, the world looked different. Her inbox overflowed with offers, interviews, collaborations, endorsements. But she didn't rush into any of them. She chose stillness. She wasn't interested in fame or revenge. She wanted something more lasting, respect. That night, she appeared publicly for the first time since the gala. She attended a charity dinner she had committed to months earlier. When she entered the room, everyone stood up and clapped. Not because she was rich, not because she was famous, but because she had shown the kind of strength people rarely see, the power to walk away without losing herself. Vivian, watching from home, saw that moment on TV. The applause, the light, the forgiveness Maya received without asking for it. It was everything Vivian had spent her life chasing, and now it belonged to someone else. In less than 24 hours, the world had shifted. A single act of cruelty had destroyed an empire, while an act of grace had built a legacy. And as Maya went to bed that night, she finally smiled. Not out of victory, but peace. Because she realized that sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't anger or payback. It's success with silence. The fallout wasn't just about money. It was about meaning. And from that day on, the world would remember the gala, not for its glitter, but for the moment when one woman's dignity became stronger than another woman's pride. The morning was calm, too calm for what was about to happen. The world had already spent a full day talking about the scandal. Memes, headlines, news debates, everyone had something to say, but no one knew that the real storm was still coming. At exactly 9 a.m., every major business outlet received the same press release. The subject line was short and cold. Termination of agreement between Dr. Maya Brooks and the Alcott Group. Inside, there was only one statement, simple, elegant, and final. Effective immediately, Dr. Maya Brooks has ended the $4 billion partnership with the Alcott Group due to irreconcilable values and professional ethics. That was it. No drama, no long explanation. Just truth, clean and sharp like glass. Within minutes, the world erupted. Business channels flashed breaking news banners. Stocks of the Alcott Group dropped 12% in the first hour. Investors panicked. Analysts called it one of the most devastating brand collapses in luxury history. Vivian Alcott was still asleep when her phone began to buzz nonstop. Her assistant burst into her bedroom, pale and trembling. "Vivian, she's done it," she whispered. Maya pulled out. "The deal's dead." Vivian sat up, confused. "What are you talking about?" Her assistant handed her the tablet. The screen glowed with headlines that made Vivian's blood run cold. Maya Brooks ends 4B deal after Gala incident. Investors withdraw from Alcott Empire. Luxury brand faces identity crisis amid scandal. Her phone kept ringing. Lawyers, board members, PR heads. She ignored them all. For the first time, the heiress felt powerless. She stared at the screen, reading Maya's single line again and again. Irreconcilable values. 2 words that cut deeper than any insult. It meant Maya didn't just end a deal, she ended trust. By midday, chaos spread across every level of Vivian's empire. Suppliers froze orders. Retailers postponed launches. Brand ambassadors quietly withdrew. Even longtime business partners issued statements distancing themselves from her company. The market had spoken. Reputation was worth more than wealth. In contrast, Maya's quiet dignity turned her into a global icon overnight. TV hosts praised her strength. Editorials called her a new kind of power. Young women across the world quoted her words, posting them like mantras. Respect is worth more than money. Meanwhile, inside her glass office, Maya watched everything unfold without a trace of satisfaction. Her assistant came in with a tablet full of media requests. CNN, Vogue, Forbes, even the BBC wants to interview you, she said. Maya smiled softly. Not now, she replied. Let them talk. I'm not here to feed the noise. She turned her chair toward the window, watching the city skyline. She wasn't thinking about revenge or fame. She was thinking about what this moment truly meant. Not just for her, but for every woman who had ever been disrespected, underestimated or humiliated in silence across town. Vivian walked into the boardroom, or rather, what was left of it. Half the seats were empty. Those who remained wouldn't meet her eyes. A lawyer cleared his throat. Ms. Alcott, he began carefully, our stock is still dropping. Investors are losing confidence. We need a plan. Vivian tried to speak, but her voice cracked. This can't be happening. It was one mistake. One moment, the lawyer sighed. One moment was enough. She looked around the room, her once loyal team now cold and distant. The walls that had once echoed with power now echoed with silence. She realized, with a chill running down her spine, that her empire wasn't crumbling because of Maya's decision. It was collapsing because of her own pride. Outside, protesters began to gather near the Alcott Group headquarters. Some held signs that read "Dignity over diamonds" and "Respect women of color." News helicopters circled above. The world wasn't just angry, it was awakening. For Maya, that same day was peaceful. She spent her afternoon in a small studio, sketching designs for her next collection. One that would support fair trade artisans and single mothers around the world. To her, this wasn't revenge. It was rebirth. Later that evening, she received a call from her lawyer confirming the final signatures. The deal was officially closed. The $4 billion project was gone. But so was the weight that had been on her shoulders. Maya thanked him quietly, then closed her eyes and smiled. Some endings are blessings in disguise, she whispered. Across the city, Vivian stared at her reflection in her office mirror. Her makeup was perfect, but her eyes were tired. She had spent her whole life building a kingdom of gold and glass, and it had shattered in one night because she had mistaken power for respect. By sunset, every news channel in the world had declared it, the Alcott-Brooks partnership officially over. But deep down, everyone knew, this wasn't just the end of a deal, it was the end of an era. And while Vivian's empire cracked under the weight of scandal, Maya's name rose higher, not as a victim but as a symbol of grace, courage, and unshakable worth. The walls of Vivian Alcott's world began to close in, quietly at first, then all at once. What had once been a life of sparkle, praise, and power was now filled with silence, judgment, and fear. For years, Vivian had lived like a queen, her name printed on magazine covers, her smile plastered on billboards, her company treated like a golden empire. People bowed to her charm, brands chased her approval, and every door opened with her name. But now that same name had turned toxic. The scandal had spread like wildfire, and no amount of money could put it out. Overnight, the Alcott Group's empire began to crumble. Investors withdrew, celebrity ambassadors cut ties, designers refused to work under her label. Every day another contract was canceled, another endorsement gone. What had taken 3 generations to build was falling apart in less than 3 weeks. Vivian tried to hold it together. She went to meetings pretending everything was fine. She smiled for cameras that no longer flashed. But behind closed doors she was breaking. Her mansion, once full of laughter and parties, now echoed with emptiness. Even the staff walked quietly, afraid to speak. Her phone barely rang anymore, and then except for her publicist, who kept begging her to disappear for a while. Go somewhere private, he said. Let things cool down. But Vivian didn't want to run. She had always believed she was untouchable. Now that illusion was gone. One morning she walked into her office and found the boardroom half empty again. The few members who stayed looked at her with pity. Her CFO cleared his throat and said softly, Vivian, we're in serious trouble. We've lost almost 70% of our revenue this quarter. Our partners don't trust us anymore. The brand, it's damaged beyond repair. Vivian didn't answer. She just stared out the window. Watching the city she used to rule. The same people who once cheered her name now whispered it with disgust. Later that day she held a press conference, her final attempt to save face. Dressed in black, she stood behind a podium and read from a prepared statement. Her voice trembled slightly as she said, I made a mistake. A terrible one. I never intended to hurt anyone. But her words sounded hollow, rehearsed, like they belonged to someone else. The crowd didn't cheer or clap. They just stared. Some reporters shook their heads. Others turned away. By the time she returned home, the internet had already torn her apology apart. Too little, too late, people said. She's only sorry she got caught. And maybe they were right. In her bedroom that night, Vivian stood before her mirror. The same mirror she had used to perfect her public image for years. But this time, she didn't see the glamorous heiress everyone once admired. She saw a tired woman with dark circles under her eyes, her face streaked with tears. For the first time, she realized something painful. She had lost not because of Maya, not because of the internet, but because of herself. Her pride had blinded her. Her need for attention had destroyed everything she had built. Meanwhile, Maya Brooks's world was rising higher than ever. She was being celebrated, honored, and loved for her strength. Magazines called her the woman who walked away with grace. Universities invited her to speak about leadership and ethics. Even ordinary people found hope in her story, and Vivian watched it all unfold on TV, not with hate, but with regret. She saw the woman she had humiliated become a global symbol of courage. The same cameras that once adored Vivian now followed Maya. Days turned into weeks, and the silence around Vivian grew heavier. Her mansion felt like a museum of her past, full of things that no longer mattered. The dresses, the jewels, the awards, none of them could erase what she had done. One afternoon, she walked into her empty office. The shelves were bare, the desks cleared out. On her desk, she found a single envelope, a resignation letter from her last loyal employee. At the bottom, in small handwriting, were 4 words: "I hope you heal." Vivian sat down, holding the letter in her trembling hands. For a long time, she didn't move. Tears fell onto the paper, blurring the words. It was in that moment she finally understood. She hadn't lost her company. She had lost herself long before. The downfall of Vivian Alcott wasn't a sudden collapse. It was slow, quiet, and deeply personal. It wasn't just about losing billions. It was about losing respect, love, and peace. In the end, the woman who once believed she could buy the world realized that the one thing she could never purchase was forgiveness. And somewhere across the city, Maya Brooks stood on a stage giving a speech about integrity and dignity. The crowd clapped as she ended with a simple line: "Power means nothing without respect." The audience rose to their feet, applauding. Vivian watched it live from her couch, her eyes glassy but calm. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel anger, only sorrow, and maybe a faint wish that she had chosen differently that night. The heiress who had once crushed a cake for fun was now crushed by her own choices. Her laughter had once filled ballrooms. Now her silence filled empty halls, and that silence was her true downfall. Months passed since that unforgettable night, the night when pride met grace and the world watched a cake become a symbol. The story had traveled across continents, translated into dozens of languages and discussed in classrooms, boardrooms, and talk shows. But while the noise slowly faded, the message remained. Respect is worth more than riches. Maya Brooks never tried to relive the moment. She didn't write a book, didn't make documentaries, and didn't turn her story into a brand. Instead, she chose peace. She poured her heart into her work, using the pain of that night to build something that mattered. Within a year, she launched the Dignity Foundation, an organization that supported young women of color in business, helping them find mentorship, funding, and most importantly, confidence. The foundation became a safe space for dreamers who had faced rejection and disrespect, but refused to give up. Maya traveled the world, not as a celebrity, but as a teacher. She stood on stages in Paris, New York, and Johannesburg, not with diamonds or designer gowns, but in her simple elegance. Every time she spoke, people listened. She didn't talk about revenge or hate. She talked about grace, resilience, and the quiet kind of power that doesn't need to shout to be heard. In one of her most watched speeches, she said softly, "That night wasn't about cake. It was about control. It was about someone thinking they could take my dignity away. But dignity isn't something you can lose. It's something you decide to keep." The audience stood in silence for a moment, then erupted into applause. People cried. People smiled. And for many it was more than just a story. It was a lesson in how to rise without bitterness. Meanwhile, far from the spotlight, Vivian Alcott lived quietly in her family's countryside home. The mansion that once hosted glittering galas now stood still, surrounded by overgrown gardens. She rarely appeared in public anymore. The scandal had taken her company, her fame, and her peace. But it had also done something else. It had humbled her. For the first time in her life, she learned to be still. She began volunteering anonymously at a local women's shelter, helping victims of workplace harassment. Nobody recognized her at first, and that suited her fine. She wasn't the heiress anymore. She was just a woman trying to make amends. One morning, she saw a newspaper headline about Maya's new foundation. It showed a photo of Maya surrounded by smiling young women, confident, strong, fearless. Vivian stared at the image for a long time. Then she whispered to herself, "She did what I never could." There was no anger in her voice, only a strange mix of regret and admiration. Back in the city, Maya's foundation continued to grow. Major companies partnered with her to fund scholarships and fair trade programs. For the first time in fashion history, factories began adopting her ethical models. Her name became a symbol of trust, not for the luxury she created, but for the humanity she restored. Years later, when people looked back at the scandal, they didn't talk about the cake anymore. They talked about the lesson. They talked about the woman who refused to scream, who chose silence over chaos and turned humiliation into history. A journalist once asked Maya in an interview, "Do you forgive Vivian Alcott?" Maya smiled gently. "I forgave her the night it happened," she said. "Forgiveness doesn't mean you forget. It means you stop letting it live inside you." Her words were simple, but they carried a kind of wisdom that time couldn't touch. By the end of that year, the world had changed in quiet ways. Companies began training staff on respect and equality. Media outlets shifted conversations toward empathy and accountability. And young women everywhere began quoting Maya's words when facing injustice. "You can't humiliate someone who knows their worth." Vivian, now older and gentler, once wrote a private letter she never sent. In it, she thanked Maya for teaching her what no school or fortune ever could: that power without kindness is empty. She folded it neatly, placed it in her drawer, and smiled sadly. It was too late to undo the past, but not too late to learn from it. As for Maya, she never looked back with bitterness. She lived each day with quiet gratitude, knowing that sometimes the universe breaks you, not to destroy you, but to rebuild you stronger, wiser, and softer. Her story became a legend not because of wealth or revenge, but because of what it reminded people. That dignity doesn't come from how high you rise. It comes from how gracefully you stand when the world tries to bring you down. And in the end, it wasn't the $4 billion deal that made history. It was the woman who walked away with grace and turned a moment of humiliation into a timeless legacy of strength, dignity, and self-respect.